All right, and I'll share my screen here. All right, can everyone see that?
Okay. I can see it, Andrea.
Okay, perfect. Now how, the drop down is covering how I usually get into the PowerPoint. How, just minimize it. Slideshow. All right, there we go. Okay, so today's talk is all about healthy feet, which is really important for our participants, clients, and members, especially with respect to falls prevention. Footwear plays a huge role in that, and I'm sure many of you are aware of that from maybe situations or incidents that have happened in your programs. It can make or break a person's fall risk, so it's really important for us to talk about today. Again, we start with the disclaimer in all of them. If anyone does have specific foot concerns, even though we talk a little bit about foot care, we do advise them to talk to their nurse or doctor, primary care, whoever it is, about their own specific footwear. And then also if they have specific concerns for feet with shoes, because we also talk about footwear, that going to a specialist like for orthotics is really important as well. So we're just sharing the general tips and tricks today for safe footwear and proper foot care. But of course, there's more in-depth information that some people may really need, depending on if they're living with diabetes or foot deformities or different things. So it's really important for them to be aware of that and to kind of seek out the right healthcare professionals. So the goal of this class is to learn about the importance of safe footwear and foot care. So we do cover both aspects of it. I don't think this talk will last as long as the previous two. Both of those were quite long. They lasted about the full hour. So today we should get through it a little bit faster. All right, so why are our feet so important? Did you know that our feet will carry us the equivalent of 5 times around the earth in our average lifetime? So we do need to take care of our feet. They carry us quite far. And this also depends on the person. Some people will probably travel much farther than that. But in general, on average, that is what our feet do for us. With age, there are changes that do happen to the feet, which is why it's really important that we include foot care in this talk. So with age, the skin on the feet gets thinner, which is really important, especially if people are kind of at risk for sores of the feet and different things like that, because the skin is thinner. It might be more apt to be broken easier or get other kind of injuries and sores. So that's something to be aware of as well. Toenails can also become thicker, which makes them much harder to cut. So again, if people are experiencing other challenges when it comes to taking care of their feet, like even just loss of range of motion in the hips or their back in order to bend down to their feet, then also having them have thicker toenails can make it even harder to groom their feet and then be at risk for, again, sores and different things as well. So another thing to be aware of and maybe be cognizant of if they do need specific foot care to get help with these sorts of things. Blood flow to the legs and feet may also become reduced as we get older, so circulation may decrease. So that might impact our sensation in the feet, which is really important for our balance. So that kind of feeds into that proprioception or somatosensory ability for our brain to know where we are in space, and may impact that, which would then disturb our balance and the way that we move. Sores on our feet may heal more slowly. So again, if circulation is decreased, any sores that we experience as we get older may heal more slowly, because the oxygen in the blood with the nutrients and also the oxygen is slower to get down there, so it's slower to heal any sores that do happen. And this is for us naturally as we age. So that can be further complicated if someone is living with diabetes, where we know that their blood travels even slower because of the higher sugar or glucose content. So then those sores are going to be even slower to heal on someone living with diabetes. So again, foot care is really, really important. Women have 4 times as many foot problems as men. And I usually pose this question to the group whenever I do it in person. Why do they think that is? Most often I hear the men shout out because of high heels, which is true. High heels aren't the best for us for a number of reasons. But also a lot of people have told me that in past, in more of their younger years, maybe they tried to fit into shoes that were too small because they didn't want their feet to look too big. And we'll talk about it more, but too small of footwear is also a risky footwear choice. Most people know that high heels are risky, but they may not really consider too small or too large of shoes to be risky as well, even though they are. And that is from the Ontario Society of Chiropodists, and it is because of their choices in footwear. So no other reason, just because of our choices in footwear. People with diabetes need specific foot care. So I already mentioned that briefly. It has a lot to do with the higher sugar content in their blood, making it slower to move. With it being more sluggish, it means that sores are slower to heal, and then especially the feet, because the feet are the farthest point from your heart. So if your blood is slow to move, your heart is your main pump. The further points is going to be the last places to get it, right? So it's really important that people living with diabetes do seek out professional foot care. So risky footwear can cause falls. No surprise there. We will talk about what does constitute risky footwear, and it may be different for different people, but there are actually a lot of choices that make footwear risky. So we'll talk about what kind of the ideal shoe is for falls prevention and just in general, and what some of these riskier kind of aspects of footwear are. The feet are really important, so we know that they carry us quite far in our lifetime, but they're also quite intricate. So there are 26 bones, 33 joints, 107 ligaments, and 19 muscles that are somehow associated with our feet. So they may not all be strictly inside our feet. A lot of them come from the lower leg and other areas, but there's a lot going on in the feet. So it would also be understandable that many of the conditions that an older adult may experience may actually show up first in the feet. So if we think about things like arthritis, osteoarthritis often targets kind of bones and joints that are weight bearing, so the ones that hold up more of our body weight and take more of that kind of force and impact. And while our feet are the bottom of the chain, right, they're holding up our whole body, and there's 33 joints in there. So arthritis could potentially show up in the feet first. It may not, but again, it is a weight-bearing joint, so it is kind of at risk for that. Nerve and circulatory disorders. So I mentioned before with just natural changes to our circulation, how the feet are the farthest point from our heart, which is our main pump for our blood and our circulatory system. So those points that are furthest away are going to notice the issues in these systems first. And then also with the nervous system, the main kind of starting point there is our brain and our spinal cord. Again, the feet are the farthest point from there. So if there are any issues, we will notice it in our feet. And these two are really important for falls prevention because it has to do with our sensation and the way that we move and sense where we are in balance. So if there is an issue here, then we might see altered balance and an increased risk of falls. And then diabetes is also on here as something that might show up in the feet first, because one of the first warning signs might be those sores that are slow to heal in the feet. Again, with the sluggish blood flow, feet being furthest from the heart, So they aren't getting that oxygen and nutrients needed to heal as quickly. So we could see those kind of warning signs in the feet first as well with diabetes. So people with diabetes can have sores that are slow to heal, which we've been talking about. And the main reason for that is because the oxygen that usually gets carried in the blood is slow to get to those spots in order to heal those sores. And that is needed in order to heal ulcers and sores and different things like that. All right, so feet and falling. What do you think the link is between footwear and foot care and your risk of having a fall? Usually I would ask this to the group. One of the biggest things is that if our feet hurt, we're less likely to be active, because if our feet hurt, we don't want to stand on them. We don't want to do anything with them because they hurt. So if we are less likely to be active, then that goes back to that fall cycle that we talked about in the very first session, where if we are kind of afraid of falling and we stop doing some of our activities, then we could lose muscle strength and mobility and actually put ourselves at a greater risk of having a fall. So the same thing can happen here, even though it's not caused by a fear of falling, but rather from sore feet, from maybe improper footwear or improper foot care. So it is really important that we take care of our feet so that, again, we can keep doing the things that we need to do and want to do. Also, as we age, there are certain things that change. One of the biggest things is that sensation in our feet may become less, which limits that feedback to our brain, which our brain really relies on for balance and stability. So if we have less sensation, we really should notify our doctors about it to see what is going on, because it really is strongly linked to falls. And then wearing improper footwear can increase our chance of falling. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. All right, so the first one is footwear. So we'll dive into kind of the footwear piece, and there's tips for buying shoes, there's tips for what to look for in the right shoe, and then of course we talk about risky footwear and things like that along with it. So again, there is a self-quiz that I usually go through with the participants at the class, and it's more so just to kind of get them thinking and get a discussion going. So I'm not going to ask you guys to unmute yourselves to answer, but we'll just kind of go through it quickly so you can understand what we ask of them. So the first one is, I wear shoes or boots with good tread on the soles. Never, sometimes, always. I wear shoes that fit well. Never, sometimes, always. Hopefully always. I wear shoes or boots that I know are safe. Never, sometimes, always. I wear slippers with closed toes and heels. And we do talk a little bit more about slippers because it kind of is a hot topic for many of our participants. I wear stockings or socks with safe footwear in and around the house. I wear shoes or boots with a heel height of less than 1 inch. And then I wear shoe inserts that fit well. And on this one, I usually say not applicable after saying never, sometimes, always. So it really is a good thing to start the discussion going. I often get a lot of sometimes with this one, with these many different questions, but I also get quite a few always. I rarely ever get the nevers, unless it is to do with the slippers and things like that, because there are certain poor footwear choices for slippers that a lot of people fall into. So the ideal shoes, we do want to buy shoes and boots with proper tread. So that was one of those first never, sometimes, always questions. Tread is really important because if there isn't enough tread and the sole is too smooth, then we're more likely to have a slip because there's no friction to kind of keep our feet on the ground. But with that being said, having too much grip can also be risky. So sometimes if there's too much grip, and say they're wearing it as an indoor shoe or slipper, a lot of people have complained that that grip actually catches on the carpet, which causes them to have a trip. So it's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We kind of want to have that perfect middle ground where there's a little bit of tread for safety, but not so much so that it grabs into carpets or grass or other surfaces and then causes a trip. The back of the shoe should cover the heel. This goes for slippers and shoes. We always want to have that closed heel shoe, and we do recommend that when people sign up for the SMART classes, is that they should be wearing shoes with closed toes and closed heels. If there is no heel, like with a flip-flop or a croc or different things like that, they're very easy to slip off or flip off or do different things. So we want to make sure that that heel is there for support and also to keep it on our feet. Low or no heel height. So some people need a little bit of a heel height, but this one is really aiming at trying not to wear high heels unless it's a special occasion, because high heels do throw us off our balance. They decrease that base of support. They also keep us in a posture where we're up on our toes and our calf muscles are constantly contracted, which can then lead to tightness in certain areas, and we know that our body is a chain, so then a lot of people may end up with hip problems or back problems or different things. So just being aware of that. Laces or Velcro to ensure a snug fit and allow for swelling. So we know that our feet do swell naturally over the course of the day. So they tend to swell with activity, they swell with heat, and then they just swell in general. So our feet tend to swell more so by the afternoon then, so they will be bigger than when we first woke up. And that'll come back later when we talk a little bit about when to go buy shoes or new shoes. So having laces or Velcro or different things like that will allow it so that you can change the fit or how snug the shoe is over the course of the day, so it's still comfortable and it's still supportive, because we want our feet to be able to not be sore by the end of the day, right? If you can't change that tightness and your feet swell, then they're going to feel too tight and it's going to cause pain, and again, we're going to be less active, more at risk for falling. We also want to have a nice rounded and wide heel, so that allows more contact with the ground, which is really important for a couple of reasons. One is that it really helps with balance, because we know that the more area we have in contact with the ground means a bigger base of support, so it's better for stability. But then also, typically we all walk, not everyone, but typically we walk striking the ground with our heel first and then rolling towards our toes. So if we think about someone wearing a pair of high heels and they strike the ground with that one pointy heel hitting the ground, all the force of their foot hitting the ground goes straight up that heel into one point on their heel. So that can be painful. So when there's a wider heel that you strike the ground with, the force of your foot hitting the ground is now kind of distributed across that whole area. So it's a lot more comfortable and easier on the foot than if someone is walking in stiletto heels. Make sense? The toe area should also be deep and wide enough to allow the toes to move and also allow for swelling, because typically as we walk, our feet do move a little bit. So we need enough room to allow them to do that. If they're squished in all together, it can cause pain. Also, if, say, their toenails kind of cut into one of the feet, it can cause a sore and cause other issues. So we want to have just enough room that their feet can move just a little bit for comfort. We want to have a flexible sole. So if the sole is too rigid, it's not going to work when we go to strike the ground with our heel and roll onto our toe. You'd pretty much be walking flat-footed, foot down, foot down, foot down, which is not how most people walk. So we need it to be a little bit flexible so it can kind of move the way our feet move when we do walk and be a little bit more natural and forgiving. Closed toe shoes may be better for those with diabetic neuropathy as well. Closed toe shoes are just important in general, just for support and comfort as well. And then winter footwear should be supportive with a non-slip tread. So again, that grip is really important, especially if we are walking in snow or potentially slippery surfaces like ice or different things like that. So it is really important that our footwear is also very supportive and has that grip. Often when I say this here, I get questions about those yak tracks or different things that people can slip on their boots in the winter for walking in snow and ice. And so I always tell them that they can be very helpful if that's the only surface that you're walking on. So if you are simply walking on snow and ice, it is very beneficial because it does allow for that grip and for safety in that regard. But what they found in the research as well, they did a study on mail couriers and people who were wearing those, and then they had to be in and out of the mail truck and then walking in and out of buildings as well to deliver mail. They actually experienced more falls because when you start walking on surfaces like the flat ground or in the truck, different things like that, or inside a building on the flat surface, it is very slippery and it is not conducive to preventing falls. It actually caused more falls. So then you might think, well, why don't you take them off every time you have to go in somewhere, drop something off or do different things? But they actually are so good at staying on your feet that it's very difficult to get them off. So you can really imagine how difficult it might be for some of our clients, members, participants as well to get them off when they try to go inside. So just something to be aware of. If they're using it strictly for walking on snow and ice, might be a great idea. But if they do have issues kind of getting them on and off or have to go in and out of buildings or different things as well, it may be something to consider. So this is a handout that we often provide the clients as well, and I always warn them that the picture of the shoe isn't necessarily the ideal shoe. Looks like a loafer, but it's mainly just there to show the skeleton of a shoe to point out all the different things that we just spoke about. So one of the things that we didn't mention before is that first point in the top left corner is shoe length is 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch longer than your longest toe. So in general, they say that we should be able to stick our thumb between the tip of our toes and the end of our shoe, just to allow for enough movement and swelling and different things like that. The laces and Velcro for the snug closure we mentioned. The covered heel, so to prevent that slipping off and to provide support. Heel is rounded and wide, so more contact with the ground. Heel height is less than 1 inch high, so no high heels. Sole has good grip, but does not stick to the carpet, so that Goldilocks level. And then the toe area is deep and wide enough to allow the toes to move. So it's good to know what the ideal shoe is, but some of our clients need tips on if they need to go buy new shoes, what should they do and how do they know that they're getting the right fit? So some of the major tips are to avoid loose fitting shoes that may slip off easily. So risky footwear can be footwear that is too small, too tight, where it causes pain, but it can also be too big or too loose because it's kind of a burden to walk in. It's sloppy, it's floppy, it doesn't really support us, and it can kind of slip off as well. This one's tricky because a lot of places may not do this anymore, but a big tip is to have your feet measured every single time. There are some stores that do this, like Becker's Shoes or Walking on a Cloud, different things like that, where they will measure your feet. And then I usually ask the clients, which foot should you have measured? Just as kind of a trick question, because it is both feet. Some people will shout out the bigger one, but then I say, how do you know which one is the bigger one? So you need to measure both feet because it is quite common that people have one foot that's slightly bigger than another. So if they do have one foot that's bigger, the tip there is to buy shoes that fit the biggest foot. We also want to walk around in the shoes before we buy them. So some people will just kind of pull them out of the box, sit down, try them on, say, yep, that fits. These are good, put them back in the box and go pay for them. But that's not really realistic because they may have a different fit once we're standing on them. Because when we're standing, it may change the shape of our feet and different things with the weight on them. And then also it's more functional. So what are we buying these shoes for? Are we buying them to just sit on the couch and not do anything in them? Or are we buying them to potentially walk or go to program or go to exercise class or do different things like that? So most often we're buying them for movement. So it's really important that we do walk around in them to make sure that they do fit comfortably while moving. In some stores, like I think Walking on the Cloud, one past participant did tell me that they let her purchase the shoes, keep them for a couple days and wear them inside the house. And then if they didn't work out for her, she could bring them back and get them exchanged, no questions asked, as long as they weren't taken outside, which is really beneficial too, because even if you do a short walk around the store, it may still not be accurate to how they're going to feel if you go and wear them all day or all morning or for a half an hour walk or something like that. So it's neat that some stores do offer that, and it'd be advisable to kind of take advantage of that if possible. Another big tip is to wear the socks you intend to wear with the shoes when you go try them on to ensure proper fit. So the trouble with, I think probably many of us can relate to this, if you are off work and you want to stop in to look at shoes after getting off work, maybe you're wearing sandals at the time because it's summer, but you want a new pair of running shoes and you didn't bring your socks. So what do? You use those throwaway kind of nylons that they supply. Well, that's fine and dandy for the store's perspective so that we aren't putting our kind of sweaty feet in there, but it's not really ideal if we aren't going to be wearing nylons when we wear those shoes for whatever we're buying them for. And typically when we buy shoes, we're going to wear slightly thicker socks, especially thicker than nylons, which will change the fit of the shoe. So it may have felt perfectly comfortable wearing nylons, but then when you get just slightly thicker socks in there, it may feel too tight. So it's always important to make sure that you wear the socks that you intend to wear with the shoes when you go to buy new shoes. Look for shoes that are made of leather or a material that molds to the shape of the foot, but also allows for the skin to breathe. So the biggest thing here is that shoes that will mold to the shape of the foot, so for that support, comfort, but allows for the skin to breathe so that we're not likely to have like buildup of sweat and get athlete's feet and different fungal infections and things like that. We want our feet to be able to breathe. Choose shoes without a seam across the top of the toes. So this is more so if the seam is kind of on the inside. A lot of participants have mentioned to me that if they did buy running shoes that had that seam on the inside, their toes sometimes rubbed against it, which actually caused a lot of pain, and then they didn't want to wear them, and again, decrease their activity, increase the risk of having a fall. So choosing shoes that are going to be comfortable. A lot of shoes now don't have that seam across the toes, but they used to. It used to be quite common. So again, just something to keep in mind. And then here's another big point. So we talked about how our feet do swell over the course of the day. So the big tip here is try on shoes at the end of the day when our feet are the largest. Because that way, if they're comfortable when our feet are at its largest, they aren't going to feel too tight or pinching when we actually go to wear them and do an activity that's going to cause our feet to swell as well. Sometimes they also recommend that if you're buying shoes for, say, walking, that perhaps you go for a quick little walk before you go looking for shoes, because again, the walking may cause some swelling. So you want to make sure that it's going to fit for whatever activity that you are choosing them for. All right, so the next part is shoes versus slippers. And slippers can be good. They just have to follow all the same rules that shoes follow, especially if being worn indoors and especially if the person is at a risk of having a fall. So the safest option around the house, especially for people who are at a higher risk of having a fall, is to wear shoes, indoor shoes in the house. If someone isn't at a high risk of having a fall, slippers are okay as well. Again, they want to follow the same rules as a shoe. So they fit snug, they have the closed heel and rubber soles so that they don't slip on surfaces. Ideally, slippers should meet all the same criteria as our shoes. So no flip-flops, like in the picture down at the bottom. It's better to wear slippers or shoes than to go barefoot. So a lot of people go barefoot in the home, which is their choice, it's their right. But if they are at a greater risk of having a fall, this can be quite dangerous because we don't have any natural kind of grip on the bottom of our feet. They're quite soft. And if we sweat, and then if we're walking on hardwood, laminate, tile, different things like that, it can be very easy for us to slip and have a fall. So just kind of being aware of that. I know most often what they recommend is wearing shoes. Sometimes if someone has a really bad sensation in their feet, a healthcare professional may recommend going barefoot if that's the only way that they can sense their feet on the ground. Because also if we buy shoes that have a lot of cushioning and memory foam and different things like that, it actually impairs our balance. So listening to the advice of your professionals, but in general, the recommendation is wearing shoes or slippers inside the home if someone's at a greater risk of having a fall. The very most dangerous option is socks only, because again, there's absolutely no grip there. It's very easy to have a fall. And I think one of the last times I gave this talk, I mentioned how I was wearing socks and I went up my own stairs, and I think I had just dusted or something, and I had sprayed that Pledge spray, and it didn't all hit the cloth. It kind of went on the laminate floor, and I almost had a fall. So if I would have been wearing shoes, I would have been a little bit safer. Just something to keep in mind as well. Any questions on footwear? Make sense? All right, the last bit is all about foot care. Again, there is a self-quiz just to kind of get the discussion going. You don't have to unmute yourselves to give your answer. The first one is, I keep my toenails neatly trimmed. Never, sometimes, always. I tend to calluses or corns before they hurt. Never, sometimes, always, not applicable. I have sores on my feet. I seek professional help for my foot condition, so like hammer toes, bunions, different things like that. I have good sensation or feeling in my feet and lower legs. So again, this one's really important because we do need to keep our toenails neatly trimmed for a number of reasons. So if someone has troubles doing that on their own, then perhaps they should look at professional foot care or getting someone to help or finding other ways to do it. Tending to calluses and corns, we have some tips around that, and not using kind of over-the-counter medications and trying to tend to them on our own. We should seek a professional to care for those. The sores on their feet is an important one, especially if they are living with diabetes. So it's something to keep top of mind, because we know that one of the first signs is sores that are slow to heal. So just kind of keeping in mind of how often they're there and how long they last. Seeking professional help for foot conditions. So again, not turning to over-the-counter medicines or razors and different things like that to take care of it ourselves. We should seek professional help on that. And then the sensation in the feet and lower legs. So again, that's really important for balance. But also if we notice changes to our sensation, we need to let our doctor know as well. Because again, it could be linked to diabetes, or it could be linked to circulation problems or nerve issues. So it's really important to be aware of that and then let regulated health professionals know. So here are some of the tips, general tips for foot care. The first one is wash your feet daily in warm but not hot water. And I usually ask the group, why not hot water? But everyone's muted, so I won't make you go unmute. So it says to use a mild soap and rinse well, dry thoroughly, especially between the toes, because we want to avoid any kind of fungal infections or things that might happen in those kinds of areas. Don't soak your feet unless cutting the toenails, because if we soak our feet, it actually dries them out. And that's the tip with the hot water as well, is that hot water actually dries out our feet as well. So cleaning them in warm water is preferable. Also, if we are experiencing sensation changes or loss, sticking our feet in hot water, we may not realize quite how hot it is, and we could kind of lead to sores and different things by doing that. So it's always advisable to use another part of the body, like the hand or the elbow, to test the water temperature before stepping in. We want to keep the skin soft to avoid getting dry and cracked. So again, if it's dry and cracked, it can lead to sores and different things like that. So we want to make sure that it is soft and moisturized, but not between the toes. So use a moisturizing cream that doesn't contain alcohol or perfumes. Again, both of these things will dry out the feet, so it kind of is counterproductive. We want to make sure that we're keeping our feet moisturized and soft. Don't apply moisturizer between the toes, because again, this is an area that needs to stay clean and dry so that we don't get fungal infections. Blah, blah, blah. The next tip is to wear socks or pantyhose. So we do want to make sure that we are wearing socks with our shoes. Again, avoiding fungal infections and different things. Wearing clean hosiery or socks and change them daily, so we don't want to keep wearing the same socks over and over again. Ensure they fit properly. So there is the one picture at the bottom of the slide there where the person's elastic is too tight, and because you can see the lines there from the elastic, it actually shows that it's cut off circulation, which really isn't good, especially if they are already living with circulation changes or if sensation changes, things like that. So we want to make sure that they do fit properly so that they aren't cutting off circulation. Ensure that they are long enough from the toe to the heel, which is kind of hard since socks really only come in 1 or 2 sizes. But in general, we want to make sure that they aren't so tight that they're kind of pulling our feet under and squishing them. We want to ensure that socks are not too tight or restricting circulation. So again, can change our sensation, put us at a greater risk of having a fall. Natural fibers like cotton or wool help to absorb moisture and help to avoid infection. Then synthetic fibers help to wick away moisture. So you may see that in more of like athletic socks to keep water out. And then light colors. This is a tip that a lot of people don't want to do because they don't want the extra laundry or work doing laundry. But if it is difficult for someone to see their feet, so they can't really check them daily for foot changes, wearing light colored socks can be really helpful, because then when you take off the sock, you can inspect the sock more so than inspecting your own foot. And if you notice any kind of color changes on there, like yellow for pus or red for blood or different things like that, then it might be a sign of an injury or an infection sooner than if you had to inspect your actual foot. Some more tips. We do want to check our feet daily for skin changes. In the picture here, there's a lady checking with a mirror, because again, some of our participants or members or clients may not have that flexibility in their hips or their back or their shoulders, anywhere to get down to see their feet. So having a mirror or something there to help assist with that so they don't have to bend down as far can be beneficial. So we want to check for things like cuts and sores and pressure points and infections. Again, especially if someone is living with diabetes. If you can't see your feet properly, ask for help from a friend or family member or use a mirror. Use the light-colored socks, have a professional, and then treat any problems as soon as possible. Don't try and wait for them to heal on their own, because we know naturally as we get older that these things will be slower to heal. And then again, if there's other conditions in there that further slow down that process, it could be detrimental. So we want to make sure that we're seeking attention as soon as we notice them. Consult a professional foot care practitioner if you do have ongoing issues. And then especially if someone is living with diabetes. So high blood sugar levels can cause complications with nerves and blood vessels, which can lead to pain, loss of feeling in the feet, and increase the risk of having a fall. And then peripheral diabetic neuropathy, if left untreated, can lead to bunions, hammer toes, and other foot conditions and deformities. So it is something that we do need to seek attention for right away, and seek that professional foot care practitioner for. So if you are unable to look after your feet properly on your own, including trimming toenails, again, you'd want to see a foot care practitioner. So it could be a foot care nurse, or it could be a doctor, or chiropodist or podiatrist. If you do have poor circulation or poor sensation in your feet, again, also seek your healthcare provider. So then a little bit of a summary. We do want to wear shoes or slippers at all times. And there actually is research that was done on community dwelling women, older women, that showed that balance and gait or walking were optimal when wearing enclosed heel slippers versus socks or backless slippers. So it is really important that the slippers that we choose fit the same rules as shoes, especially if we are at a greater risk of having a fall. We want to wear slippers with sturdy soles, enclosed heels, and that fit snugly. So if we think about kind of the typical big floppy slip-on slippers, those are kind of the worst things for us. We want to make sure that they work more like a shoe. Trim your toenails straight across and not too short. Sometimes when people try to do more of the curve, they may end up digging in too far or causing a sore or causing an ingrown toenail. So they do recommend trying to cut straight across and then not too short, because again, that can be really painful if anyone has accidentally cut their nails too short. It can cause a lot of pain if there's any kind of pressure on there. The tip with this one also is, so if someone is living with diabetes, it is best to get your foot care and your toenails done by like a foot care nurse or some kind of professional. Going to the spa and having a pedicure, and they aren't trained the same way. So they may cut your toenails, but they may not do it in a way that's best for someone living with diabetes. So a past client of mine, they once said that they could never give up going to the spa and having their pedicure. They loved it so much, but she was living with diabetes. So what she did as a compromise for herself was that she would go to the foot care nurse to get her toenails trimmed and get her actual foot care taken care of. And then when she went to the spa, she would explicitly tell them, do not cut my toenails, do not do any of that kind of work with my feet. Basically give me a foot massage and the foot bath and all that fun stuff. So that she still got pampered, but she still got the proper foot care that she needed. So again, just something to keep in mind. We don't have to give everything up. We got to do what works for us and advocate for ourselves. Purchase special footwear if required. So if someone does need orthotics or does need different things, making sure that they do purchase those so that it does help them with the way that they move and different things like that is really important. Having a shoe specialist adjust your orthotics. So if you do need orthotics, always go to the professional for them. There are a lot of things in the pharmacy that stand on this machine and we'll tell you what insert you need, which it might be okay for the general population, but if someone really has a concern with their feet, their foot care, footwear, it is really important that they go to a professional. And if the professional says, hey, yeah, that'll work for you, then you could use it, but definitely I'd go to the professional first. Consult a podiatrist or chiropodist if you have sores on your feet. So again, could be a sign of something else, especially if they are slower to heal. If your feet do swell, elevate your legs when sitting, general tip. Seek medical attention if you do lose any kind of feeling in your feet or lower legs, because again, could be a sign of something. Also, we know what it does to increase our risk of having a fall. And then the last tip under the do's is to keep active. If we keep active, it's going to keep the blood flowing to our feet, keep it so that the good nutrients and the oxygen goes down there, and then also helps to keep up with the circulation and different things. So it's really important that we do keep active so we decrease our risk of having a fall. So then the don'ts on the other side of the list are don't go barefoot. But again, if your doctor has advised otherwise, then that's who you would listen to. These are the general guidelines, but in general, they say don't. Especially don't go barefoot inside or outside, and especially on a beach. So with the beach, it's really important because that sand gets really hot. Again, if someone has loss of sensation, they may not notice quite how hot it is, which can cause sores, burns, things like that. Also, we never really know what's lurking underneath that sand, whether there are sharp objects like rocks or shells or pieces of glass or different things. So someone could easily get a cut or a sore. If it's on the bottom of their foot, they may not know for a little while. So making sure to wear shoes wherever possible. Don't wear ill-fitting shoes because they alter foot motion and gait. So even simply wearing the wrong type of shoes can alter the way that we move, and again, put us at a greater risk of having a fall. Don't wear shoes that are torn or too tight. So if they were your favorite shoes, you can try to get them repaired if it is something that can be repaired. Otherwise, when in doubt, get rid of it and find something safer. Don't wear backless slippers. So again, we need that heel closed in for support and for safety so it doesn't slip off. Don't purchase used shoes. So even if someone says, oh, they were only worn once, or I never really wore them, it's still somewhat molded to the shape of their foot. So it's not going to fit you the way that it will and normally. And if it has been worn, it is not as supportive or as structured as it once was. There is kind of the myth out there that we have to break in our pairs of shoes, but actually shoes should be comfortable from the get-go. They shouldn't need a break-in period. So that's kind of a myth that's out there. So we want to make sure that we are buying shoes that fit us right off the start. And then don't use over-the-counter corn medicines or razors. We want to seek that professional help if we do experience kind of foot conditions like that. And that's it. We made it through. Any questions?